Alien abductees of Reddit are people who have claimed to see a UFO. What's your story? Episode 2. Back in the spring of 1997, a group of us, neighborhood kids, were looking up at the night sky, observing the Hale-Bopp comet. I grew up hours from any major city, so the view was pretty clear. After a while, we started to notice a red and a white dot circling around each other, making sudden movements in every direction. Like no aircraft I have ever seen or have ever seen since. At a certain point, they merged into one craft, then shot out 3 smaller crafts. Although we couldn't tell whether it was a craft because they just appeared to be balls of light. This went on for a couple hours. Right before the lights disappeared, they accelerated at lightning fast speed into the darkness. We all went home, terrified of what we saw. The next day on the front page of our small hometown paper, it said it received several calls. The explanation they gave was that the local airport was testing aircraft. I'm sure how much I believe that story because of what I saw. To this day, whenever I see my friends that were there that night, we'll sometimes talk about it. None of us can be sure what we saw, but to this day, none of us have ever seen anything like it. The black triangle UFO is a solid object. It wouldn't form anything. I've seen it no less than 10 times in the past decade, while stargazing in Indiana. I'm right in the middle of 2 Air Force bases on either side of the state, so it's not unlikely to see aircraft. I've seen Bell Super Cobras with live rockets, I've seen C-130s, I've seen Apaches, I've seen pretty much everything fly over. Even the Goodyear blimp. The black triangle, though. I've seen it more times than people would believe. One night, it came over 3 different times. Once going northeast, then again a few hours later going southeast. Then finally it came from the south and was going west back to where it came from. Sometimes it's very low and massive, others it is just a tiny speck that you can't distinguish from another airplane except with binoculars, except it makes no sound, and when it is so high up, it goes at such speeds that it's not even imaginable. Apparently, this black aircraft, i.e., doesn't exist, is called the TR-3B, and is allegedly the successor to the Aurora, which was the successor to the SR-71 Blackbird, which you also must realize did not exist for decades until it was officially announced, after it was retired. The TR-3B, if people are to be believed, I don't want to, but I kind of have to after seeing it fly over, supposedly has a gravity disruption drive in it, where it effectively reduces the G-forces applied to the crew by neutralizing the effects of gravity on the craft, some sort of dipolar gravitational disruption through strong electromagnets, I don't know. It can apparently fly at over 120,000 feet, which, again, assuming the length of the craft that was supposedly leaked is correct, 600 feet, and measuring it against the length of a known aircraft, at a known altitude, thanks, flight tracker, I can say without a doubt that, assuming all of this is true, it can go over 130,000 feet, that's nearing the outer edges of the stratosphere, because we're talking about something that is absolutely massive when fairly low, and it was only really distinguishable as multiple lights via strong binoculars. I've seen it, my dad has seen it, my brother has seen it. Hell, even the dog was aware of it. It can be very bright, can go quite slow if it wants to, or it can fly over as a tiny speck almost faster than you can keep up with it using binoculars, and it doesn't hardly make any noise. None at all when it is really high up, but it makes a low humming sound if it's really low. I was at a program called Wilderness Quest in Utah when I was 17. Long story short, our small group saw a weird light in the sky moving at incredible speeds in multiple directions. It then seemed to enter our atmosphere accompanied by a large flash of light. Moments later, 16 fighter jets, 8 stealth bombers, and 1 large radar plane flew over our heads to the area we witnessed the strange light. It was a super clear night, and in the middle of the Utah desert, you could see the night sky extremely well, so we were able to count all the planes with ease. The next day a new wilderness guide showed up, said he used to work for NORAD, and asked us a bunch of questions about what we saw. The next morning, he was gone, and no one ever heard of him again. The reports in the paper said it was the Genesis satellite crashing. There is no way in hell that thing was a satellite crashing. I also just posted this earlier on the NORAD Twitter feed, weird timing. Wilderness Quest was different 10 to 11 years ago. There weren't all these new laws and restrictions. A kid burned down $1 million worth of forest, and everything changed after I left. The guy Larry went bankrupt and sold the business. Back then, we just hiked wherever we wanted to. I will post pictures when I scan them into my computer. We saw ancient Anasazi ruins that had been untouched for decades. Hordes of pottery everywhere were broken into pieces. It was pretty intense. I was driving along in my car a few years ago. Broad daylight. Eastern New Mexico. It was a clear sunny day, but I could see a spherical light in the sky in the distance. It looked like a chrome sphere. It hovered there for 20 minutes or, seemingly pacing my car. The next chance I got, I stopped and took a picture of it. Yep. I saw a UFO. I drove on home, imagining all the imaginary internet points I'd get for that picture. Then I got home and put the picture onto my computer and looked at it at max magnification. Totally a weather balloon miles and miles away. Looked like a chrome sphere 5 miles away, following my car. Adre, West Virginia. One night, a few years back, my friend, who is driving, and I were taking his girlfriend home when he decided to take the long way home. As we were driving along this fairly deserted back road, I began to zone out, and I stared at this blinking red light off in the distance and casually thought to myself, I wonder when they built a cell phone tower all the way out here. When suddenly it blinks and is dramatically closer than it was just a moment earlier. At this point, my friend points it out and stops in the road. It blinks once more and is directly in front, and over top of us. The red light is so bright it floods the car in a deep scarlet hue. I lean forward so that I can see directly into the light. In that brief moment, I felt a flood of negative emotions. The closest description I can offer is to that of being naked under a giant microscope and having every pore examined thoroughly. I then look away from the light to my friend and ask him to drive. He barely responds, apparently in a similar state. Then he snaps out of it and starts driving. As we get a little way down the road, I notice the red light isn't fading, and the interior of the car is still clearly lit by it. I look out the window, and to my horror, the light is following us and does so for approximately 1 to 2 miles. The light unexpectedly veers off to the left and comes down to the ground level in a patch of trees adjacent to the road. My friend stops the car again and continues to stare at it, and abruptly declares he is going to get out and look at like he is in some sort of trance. He opens the door, and I grab his arm and tell him if he does, I will get in the driver's seat and leave him, that we had to leave that instant. He looks at me and seems to come to and punches the gas so hard the tires lose traction and spin. The light remained stationary as we rode away, but I've never looked at the night sky the same. The incident occurred after dropping off my buddy's girlfriend, so she wasn't present. In my rush to type the story, I forgot that part. I'm starting to think there might be something to the color of these lights everyone is seeing. Maybe there is a pattern with the color and the experience, just a hypothesis. I'm sure I'll prove myself wrong as soon as I submit this. I had a similar experience with my sister in my car, but it was an orange light. For some reason, it caught my attention even though it was almost disguised, and I watched it for a while, maybe a minute or two, while I was sitting and waiting to turn left out of my cul-de-sac. It was peculiar because it was almost hidden. It was right under the light of a street lamp. In fact, it looked like it was the bulb of the street light, but something seemed off about it. It was way too otherworldly. I don't know how to explain it. I remember this feeling I had that the light was trying to camouflage itself, even though I knew logically it didn't make sense. You know when you get that intuitive feeling that someone is not being forthcoming, so it makes you want to pay more attention to it? Such as, when you are younger, and your parents talk in code about something, and even though they've had conversations that didn't make sense to you before, you can tell that something's up this time. I had that feeling. Something was going on, and I wasn't supposed to know, so of course, I wanted to know more. Finally, I said to my sister, "Do you see that ball of light? What the hell is that? Is that the light from the street lamp? That doesn't look right," to which she responded, "Yeah. I've been staring at it this whole time, wondering if it was just me seeing it." The moment she finishes that sentence, the orange light thing dips down a little bit, then slowly goes into the sky at an angle, but it still remained quite low to the ground. The weird thing is, we weren't afraid of it. We both agreed we had to figure out what it was, so I hit the gas and drove after it. We got as close to it as we could. The road ended. Then we watched it turn on and off, before it disappeared entirely. No one believes us except my mom. We even got footage of it, but it looks like shit, of course. Everyone always says it must have been a Chinese lantern or ball lightning. The thing is, though, there was no one outside, so I have no idea who would have let it go, and it did not have the shape of a typical lantern. Also, I have let go of Chinese lanterns before, and this looked starkly different. Not to mention, it hovered in the air absolutely motionless for a few minutes before it headed into the sky. We didn't feel scared until afterward. My sister slept in my room that night. I switched between feeling scared, because of the UFO stories I was looking up, and my sister being scared made me a little scared, too, and desire to see it again. We live right next to a wildlife sanctuary, So there is always a ton of noises from the animals in the summertime. The tree frogs never shut up. Yet, that night, my mom pointed out that there wasn't a single noise outside. We also had the windows down at the time when we were watching it, and we noticed that there wasn't any wind, so we didn't understand how it was moving at such an angle. I don't know. I used to shoot UFO stories down immediately, before this incident, but now I think twice before I discount something. Based on my experience, I definitely don't think the majority of people are just making these stories up. You only bring negative attention to yourself when you tell other people about this stuff. I am not saying it was an alien, though. I just decided it was purely a UFO in its most literal sense and leaving it at that. Though, I don't look at lights the same anymore. If it was an alien or time traveler or whatever, they pick the smartest way to hide in plain sight. One night I go down to the kitchen to drink water, at about 4 a.m., and I hear this weird, kind of low-pitched buzzing sound coming from outside. I go out to the backyard, and shit you not, I see this fucking bright rounded object, UFO, hovering about 600 feet right above me. I just froze there. I almost felt like I was paralyzed for a moment. I watched it ascend higher into the air and take off at an incredible speed and disappear into the wintry clouds. That night I had a dream that I was abducted. Now when I think about it, I wonder if the dream was real but was purposely made to seem like a dream? I obviously don't know for sure, but fucking scary shit, man. My worst dream ever, you'll love it, it's the sound that gets you, really. My place doesn't have curtains yet, so I get a good view of whatever is outside, recent rebuild, so. Following a shitty day at work, I got home and decided to keel over at 7 for a few hours and doze off watching the airplanes come into land at the local place. Nice and comfy, etc. I kinda doze a bit when the cats zone. Fighting again, I thought, and I start to hear this weird electrical nasty shit buzzing resonance. It's a really unpleasant sound, like the kind of thing that makes your teeth and eyes itch. Imagine people running their nails down a blackboard but doing it in your bones and the back of your eyeballs. Ow. And a weird luminescent colored floating globe thing about the size of a football comes floating up from beneath my window. Now the sound is a screech, and I feel this massive slam forcing me down like gravity has just decided it's been pissing about for the last billion years, and I black out. Kinda snap too. The sound is just as bad, and the globe thing is inside my window. Oh good, I have enough time to get as far as thinking, what the fuck? Before, wham. I'm hammered again. I come back and the fucker's at the end of my bed. Oh shit, the sound is deafening, and bang, it was above my head. I woke up on the floor 2 hours late for work feeling like I've been hit by a truck. The next few days were really weird. Seeing as people are talking about ball lightning and sleep paralysis, got to chime in my little experience from June. I was sleeping at a friend's summer cottage, and as far as I recall, I had been asleep already for a few hours, so it's not one of those falling jolts you get while falling asleep. Very abruptly, I wake up to this incredibly intense feeling, like a huge current is being run through my brain, and all my knowledge is being accessed. The event was longer in duration than an electric jolt you might get from an electric bug swatter, but 1 solid second at max. The intensity of it was the horrible part. It was like my brain was grabbed into a strong, buzzing electric grasp, my eyes were wide open, and my heart was racing like crazy. After the experience, I lay on the bed awake and fully vigilant for a couple minutes straight, trying to contemplate what just happened. In the morning, I jokingly told my friends that I was scanned. It's interesting that it remains so vividly in my memory, as I generally don't remember dreams or any sleep-related things very much. TLDR, aliens abduct my mom and her friend. Mom doesn't remember much, but her friend remembers everything. Apparently, they were both abducted again several times after that. Aliens predict the future. My mom tells a story of her and her friend. Let's call her friend Lisa. When my mom and Lisa were teenagers, they were up on the roof of Lisa's house, and they saw a bright light in the sky. The next thing they know, the light is gone. The thing is, they think they've been on the roof for like 15 minutes, but something like 3 hours passed. Mom doesn't remember anything about what happened during that time, and Lisa simply refuses to talk about it. She would answer my mom with things like I don't know and just drop it. For a long time. So, a couple months later, Mom moved away and lost contact with Lisa for about 10 years. She finally meets up with her again and immediately notices that something is odd about Lisa. Lisa appeared very distant to her, with a very dreamy demeanor. Like she was really happy and at peace, for no good reason. After they talked for a bit, Lisa brought up the incident on the roof. Mom says she still doesn't really remember anything about it, but Lisa remembers. She remembers everything. She said that at first, it was all in bits and pieces, and she couldn't remember any of it clearly. She was confused and scared and wanted to avoid discussing it. Then, as time passed, she began to remember more of it. She remembers it all clearly, and she remembers the other 3 times she was abducted after that clearly as well. At first, they paralyzed her somehow and did all sorts of invasive experiments on her, but by the most recent time, they stopped probing her and began to talk with her. They didn't speak English or any other human language, but she could understand everything they said, even though she couldn't speak their language herself. Apparently, they told her all sorts of things, stuff about space, Earth itself, and most shockingly, predicted years beforehand that she would get pregnant in a specific year, and it would also be a stillborn, and that she would never be able to have children again. They also told her that it was not their fault, and they even made an attempt to save her from this fate, but they were unsuccessful. They also told her that they had abducted my mother. Another time, after that first incident. Mom says she has no recollection of any other potential abductions, but she does have recurring nightmares of being abducted, but she's almost sure that they're just that, nightmares. Anyway, Lisa tells Mom that every time she speaks with them, she comes to understand the truth more and more. When Mom inquires what the truth is, Lisa just says that you will know eventually, and she says that once she learned of the truth, then everything became wonderful. Mom has seen her a few more times over the years. We still live in another state from her, and she apparently has a pretty normal life, and doesn't like to obsess over alien stuff, like some supposed alien abductees do. She only ever brings it up in passing, not like it's a central part of her daily life. Not your typical story, and I'm saying right now I don't believe in aliens that abduct people, not even one bit, but I always used to have nightmares about the Greys or nightmares about watching a UFO in the sky just hover and look at me. Sometimes I would be minding my own business in these dreams, and when the Greys would come, a feeling of indescribable horror would overtake me. I would try to run in these dreams, but I would feel the aliens crawling into my mind. I would become staggered and dizzy, and my eyesight in a dream, would fail. My limbs wouldn't move properly then, nothingness. I would wake up sometime later shaking, perhaps trying to rid myself of the sleep paralysis. I would often sit awake for an hour or so, and every time I thought about the nightmare, I would get the most intense shiver up my spine. Sometimes the dreams happen more than one night, and I always seem to have these dreams when I travel or go on vacation. One night I decided I had had enough and went back into the dream world, knowing what awaited me. Predictably the Greys came, and I could feel them probing my mind again. As they got closer and I became dizzier and more unfocused, I pulled from out of nowhere a sword and killed every one of them. I woke up, and I haven't had a dream like that since. It's been 3 years. I have no doubt it was just my mind and that I conquered some fear I had from watching too many Stephen King movie adaptations as a kid, but it's very interesting to think, what if they were real and were probing my dreams and I destroyed their dream avatar or something? Who knows? I'm not trying to discount people's experiences, but I think 99.99999% of all alien stories are similar to stuff I experienced, overactive dreams and sleep paralysis.